Daniel chapter 1 begins reading, and we're going to do a little bit of reading this morning in this chapter, all of it. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, into the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury, into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake to Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, cunning and knowledge, understanding science, and such as had in them ability in them to stand in the king's palace, to whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. And among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. And Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your meat and for your drink, for why should he see your faces worse, liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me in danger of my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. And he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat of the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse, or vegetables and water. And these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king communed with them, and among all that was found, none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding, the king inquired of them. He found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his realm. And Daniel continued even into the first year of the king of Cyrus. And I asked the Lord's blessing on our reading this morning. And I know it's a lengthy reading, and I was really pleased that there was so much reading out of Daniel and 2 Timothy and some verses that I had been kind of thinking on. These verses were brought up. And I'm not going to go into talking about Daniel's dreams or his visions or the fiery furnace and things like that. I just wanted to kind of focus on what their situation was. And I do have a problem this morning. I showed up with notes, and by the end of the association, I had notes, and I was telling Auntie last night, I either have to throw this away and start over, or I'm going to preach forever. So I didn't do either. I'm not going to do either of those things. But as we look at these verses, something that was said, I believe by Uncle Rick, um, I have it written down somewhere in all this mess, is that being the Lord's people, they were not in a wonderful situation right now. But even in being overcome, they were overcoming. The fact is that they were in this situation and it was out of their control. Jerusalem was besieged. This was a bad deal. This was bad news. And I look back at my life and I think of the times that the Lord has taken me through things that seemingly were a disaster. And maybe they were. But how many times in young people, you will experience this in your life, because everybody does. The world in life can beat you and triumph over you, but it doesn't mean you've lost. It doesn't mean that you're defeated if you've suffered a loss. And there's been situations in my life where I've had to look back and I thought, Lord, how did I lose every battle and still win the war? And the answer to that is because of Him. He's the reason why. And I think of the verses and the stories that I've known since I was a little guy, and I feel guilty thinking, how did I not know? Lest Israel vaunteth itself. Sometimes we go through things that bring us closer to the Lord, and those aren't always prom night. They're not. And I was thinking to myself, in my own life, in the Lord's people, we read through the scriptures, and I know people in my life that I love dearly, and I think to myself, when are God's people stronger? When are they closer to the Lord? When are they when do they acknowledge His power and His deliverance and His provision the most? It's when they need Him the most. It's when they acknowledge Him the most, because they're dependent on Him. And in this time that we read about these Hebrew children in Israel and Judah, we read that they had just been besieged by the enemy of God's people. Nebuchadnezzar won. But it doesn't mean that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Israel, it doesn't mean they lost. It just means they took a hit. And we know why they did, and we know that these were consequences for their actions, and these things would eventually play out in several different ways. But as they stood there at this time in their lives, what kind of defeat did they feel that they had suffered? Like I said, Nebuchadnezzar won. And especially, in now we have a lot of upheaval in our nation, in the world, and there are wars, and there are rumors of wars, and there's a lot of things going on that are very serious. I had to kind of check myself. I was watching way too much news, and I want to know what's going on, and it's all very exciting and tantalizing, and it catches your attention, and me personally, I have to be careful which rabbit holes I go down, because I can. But there's a real threat when there's a fight, because the winner, to the victor goes the spoil, right? We just had an election. It was a very serious one, and I'll let you guess how I voted if you want, but probably don't have to. But one of the reasons why it was serious, at least for me at this stage in my life, is because I know that it's going to dictate not just the next 4 years, but it's going to dictate the culture and the mood and the mindset of our nation. Because the winner takes it all. Not only does the victor goes the spoil, the winner does whatever they want, and even we now see our president kind of doing that same thing. But the winners also, they can rewrite history. They can change the rules. And some of you might not know this, but I'm a guy that I love my processes. I have processes for everything. I have the same process every morning. I have the same process every night. And that's just how I truck along. I follow my processes. And I don't want people messing up my process. I'm going to apologize to James and Ari now because they're going to mess up my process moving into my home, their home now, and they're going to love me, and then they're going to hate me, and then they'll love me again, and then they'll hate me again, because that's also part of my process. I can be a little bit abrasive, but I don't like things messing up my process. The winner gets to change the process. And he did for the Hebrews. He was changing the process. And one of the interesting things about the spoils of war, we see here that Nebuchadnezzar, he had instructed his people, he took the valuable things. He took the vessels out of the house of God, and he put them into his own treasury in the house of his God. And he took parts of the royal family, and he took of the choice young men. He took the good things. And by the way, that's a common practice. As a matter of fact, we know the story. King Saul was instructed to kill everybody, and he brought home Agag, and there's the famous line, "What is the bleating of the sheep? I thought I told you to kill everybody." "Oh, I did." "Well, what's this mess?" It was a common practice. You don't get rid of the good stuff. But I was thinking of this in a different way, and maybe it's because I've been watching too much news. We have people from all over the world that America, it is the promised land. And they want to come here for the opportunity and the benefit. And they want to come here for the peace and grocery stores being full of food and police officers on the street keeping law and order. And they want all those things. And by the way, if I lived in Guatemala, I would be swimming across anything to get here too. I get it. I wouldn't want to be there. I would want to be where things are like they are here. But sometimes it's kind of funny to watch. People come and then they want to change the process of what made this place great. They want to change the course of things. They want the benefits, they want the choice young men, and they want the wonderful items, but they don't want to follow the process that led to those things being obtained and these choice young men being grown. And I think to myself, how do we see that play out spiritually? We live in a nation that was largely based on Christian values and spiritual understanding and beliefs. And the result of it is a wonderful America. So why would you change that when it's equaled so many wonderful things? And the reason why it has is because the principles of the Lord's word, they prove true. They always do. Following the Lord in his guidance and leadership, it will always work. And I'm thinking this in the context of the Hebrew children and Daniel. What were they feeling and what were they seeing? They had been conquered, but did they also keep the understanding, which I believe they did because of the decisions that they made and the stands that they took, even in captivity, that things were going to work out? And these are lessons that I've learned in my life several times, that if I trust in the Lord, things will work out. Maybe they won't work out the way I wanted them to or I had envisioned. Like I said, I'm a man of processes, and one of the flaws in my process is that if something occurs in my life, I take that and I go from A to Z. I figure everything out that's going to happen, that possibly can happen, and then I start to think and feel and make decisions based on Z instead of A. When Z hasn't happened, neither has Q or L. I mean, those things, it just changes everything. Because I like to know how things are going to work out. As my boys will tell you, I'm a skip to the end kind of person. We have a gesture in my family, and it's this. James is doing it right now. Sometimes stories are really long, and this means, would you pull the trigger on this, please? Skip to the end. What are you saying? But I don't appreciate sometimes that the story is the important part, not just the end. The story of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's very important for us to know and understand. And the story of our life is very important for us to understand. We know the end, This part, we get to go home and be with the Lord. And, we were kind of talking over this weekend. My grandmother's sick. There's a cost of doing business. And I realized this. The more people that I love, the more people I'm going to lose. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. That's part of my story, the people that I love. Do I want to see them go? No. But I know they're going to. But I know where they're going. That's the skipping to the end part. But it doesn't change the whole story. I was greasing up Uncle Randy and Auntie last night, telling them how much I love them and appreciate them. And we're all going to be sad when their house is gone. And I was walking around the front yard, and I'm thinking, I put this driveway in with Uncle Randy, Mark, and Dwight. And it still stands. It's still great. I'm going to miss that because it's part of my story. Going there with my kids and being there after the May meeting and associations and seeing everybody and watching Joni jump in the pool with 100 people in the backyard to rescue some drowning kid while we're all standing around drinking tea. All those things. We don't just get to skip to the end. We get to live in this life and in this process. And it's important, just like the story of the Hebrew children in Daniel. But the Lord's principles prove true, and godly wisdom works, and the practices that the Lord has laid out for the world to follow will be successful. Even if people are non-believers, if husbands love their wives and wives submit themselves and love their husbands, they're going to have a good marriage, probably. And if children obey their parents because this is right, things are going to be good, even if they're not believers. Even if they're not believers in the Lord. These practices and these processes that the Lord gave us to live by will prove successful. They will work. Does it make someone a believer if they love their wife and a husband and a wife loves her husband? It doesn't make them a believer. Does it make a believer out of a kid because he minds his mom and dad? No. To taking the vessels from Judah and putting him in his own house of worship, did it make him closer to God? No. He could not be a usurper. He got it by theft. It didn't make him faithful to the Lord. It just made him appreciating the value of these things that had been given to God's people by him and for him. Ecclesiastes 8 and 15, you don't have to turn there with me, but I've always appreciated this verse. I think it's because, everybody in my life, we're workers. We work. And there's value in that. If I can find Proverbs in my Bible here. Proverbs 8 in verse 15. Ecclesiastes 8 and 15. I'm thinking that is not what I was studying earlier. Well, for time's sake, I won't even turn there. But it says there's nothing better. There's nothing better for a man to go to work and come home, eat his food and drink his drink and love the wife of his youth. There's nothing better under the sun. And without the Lord, there is nothing better, is there? To enjoy the fruits of your labor, to enjoy the product of your process and see the results of it, the consequences of it. I was talking with Gracie last night. We're standing out in the backyard, and I said, Uncle Randy and Auntie's, their backyards changed at least 5 times. And I was kind of pointing out some of the things that have been, and there's some trees that will always be there, but some other things have changed. I said, they changed it to the way they liked it, so they could enjoy the fruits of their labor. And we're painting in our house right now and doing baseboards. And really the common thought is, why didn't we do this like 10 years ago? We didn't even know how bad it looked until we fixed it. And I was like, man, this looks great. And every once in a while, I just go to those areas and just look at it. And my kids make fun of me because we mow and we weed eat and we trim the bushes and the shrubs. And I drive down the street and I drive past my house. I want to see what we did. And I want to see that it's good. And by the way, the world, even without the Lord, there's nothing wrong with that. It's good that they're busy and they're being productive and they're raising good families and they're, paying their bills and calling Brother Gary to find out how they can cheat on their tax. Anyway, I have a great guy. He's from Israel, Haifa, Israel. And we sat down with him and I go, I want you to get every dime you can. Lie, cheat, steal, keep me off the radar. But I want it all. It's mine, right? All these processes that we have, they're good. Sometimes there's nothing better. People can work, they can have families and have love in their life. And they can get a lot. But that's all they get. I know what I get by serving the Lord. And I'm not only talking about the eternal hope and rewards, and I'm also talking about in this life, the peace that surpasses all understanding. I mean, when I nail it at work, I come home feeling accomplished. But if I died, my brother Ryan pointed this out. He goes, Rick, if you died stressing over this job, there's going to be an ad on Indeed for your position before you're even in the ground. Knock it off. You're not saving babies. I'm like, well, I got to keep that blood pressure up, So, but for the world that lives just out of Ecclesiastes 8:15, that's all they get. What do I get with the Lord? I have a Lord that bears witness with me. I have a goal in my process. Lord, please be pleased with me. Look at your servant, and I know I've said this from this pulpit before. I say it from the pulpit in San Fernando all the time. Whatever state I'm in, please find me faithful. Whatever that is, however that looks, Lord, find me doing that. I joke with San Fernando, when the Lord returns, if he returns before I die, I hope it's on Sunday. I hope I'm singing louder than anybody. My check's in the offering plate, and visitors came in my car. I want him to see me doing well. I want him to be pleased with me. I know I've told the story here before too. There was a time, my brothers were wonderful, are great athletes. Especially Robert, he just pound the ball. I wasn't. I actually had to work. I had to find out the processes of step toward the ball, don't pull your head, leap. I had to know all the tricks just to put the bat on the ball. And a couple times, and I was talking with John Hudson about this, I played right field a lot. And my dad was the coach, so people think that the coach's kid gets to be the pitcher. No, he stuck me in right field where people like me deserve to be. And he said, get better, But there's a couple times I just really made great contact with the ball. And I remember one time rounding second base, because I could run. People were cheering, hey, he hit the ball, wow. I looked at my dad, not my coach. I didn't look at the other players. I wanted my dad to see me doing. Are you seeing me finally doing this well? I want the Lord to see us all doing well. And you guys did such a wonderful job. I'm so grateful for this weekend. Don't we all want the Lord to see us doing well? Well, what if we're in terrible situations? What if we have been besieged? What if we are in a situation where we don't feel like we're in control of the things that are going on in life, and other people are dictating to us what we have to do? James and Ari will experience that for about a year, being told what to do. Jen goes, well, James just wanted to just make sure that you're not bossing him around all the time. And I'm looking at her like I would look at him. What are you talking about? Pick up your stuff, But this is the situation that they were in. It's easy to forget sometimes how the Lord brings us through things. And the children of Israel are great examples. They stood on their beliefs. They did not let even this terrible situation separate this. And there's so many verses that I already had in my notes that were read over this weekend. And one of them, Romans 8, in 35. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Who? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Will those things separate us? Because I will tell you this in my experience, and this is not me tooting my horn, those things didn't separate me. When are the Lord's people stronger? When are they more focused on Him? When are they the most dependent? I mean, we're always dependent, but when do we acknowledge our dependency on Him the most? Because it's not during, I mean, it is during tribulation, at least for me in my life. It is in distress that I pray more, that I'm focused more on Him, that I'm more aware of where His hand might be moving in my life. Otherwise, if nothing's going on, I'm just running through Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays and Mondays. I'm just doing my thing, going through my process. I'm just living life. If there's nothing pressing on me, I'm ashamed to say I don't focus on Him as much than when things are a little rough. I pray a lot more when things are rough. Like I said, I look a lot more. As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all things we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. And again, I read this verse and I look at the process of this verse. A conqueror is somebody who has won the fight. The fight is won. So now you can look back and say, I won. I've conquered. But in the midst of the fight, in the uncertainty and in the distress and in the peril, there's more of a, I hope I win the fight. But we know, going back to pulling the trigger, we are more than conquerors through Him, because the Lord takes care of us. He takes care of me. These young men proved to be a benefit. They proved that the Lord is faithful. The Lord takes care of His people. I was talking with a coworker one time, and we had this incredible goal to hit to get a small bonus. And so we just worked. I mean, I work in a store. I don't go out to the corner with a sandwich board on and a bell going, come to my store. People come into my store, I give them what they want, and they drive away. It's kind of a similar company to what my Uncle Steve just retired from. I have repeat business, it's wholesale, so I know all these guys. But there's really not a whole lot I can do to increase the business other than just continual, consistent, friendly service. I gain customers that way. I don't visit a lot of customers that I walk up to and say, hey, I'd like you to buy from me from now on. And them go, you know what? The guy that I've been dealing with for 19 years, I'm not going to deal with him anymore. I like your style. I'm going to go with you. I got to win them slowly, piece by piece. So my coworker asked me, because he also believes in the Lord, and we've talked a lot about church and the Lord and eternity and people. And he goes, Rick, did you pray for our bonus? And I go, yeah, I didn't. I should, but I didn't. Felt kind of weird, Lord, give me that bonus. I don't know. It just doesn't really feel right in my mouth. But my unbelieving boss, antagonizer, he was listening, because he knows I'm a believer and he knows I pray. And so he wanted the bonus too. And I said, no, Raul, I didn't pray for a bonus. I said, but a funny thing. I said, I'm not a lucky rabbit's foot. I'm not a lucky charm. I think I do my job okay, but probably not any better than the next guy. I try. I said, but everywhere I've worked, the Lord has always blessed that company. I said, the Lord doesn't have direct deposit to my bank account, but He blesses my employer. My employer ends up paying me more. It's funny how that works. The Lord takes care of me. And if I look at the process of how he takes care of me, sometimes it comes through different ways and different avenues. But again, like I said, when I'm focusing on the Lord, I'm really looking at how he blesses me. Well, he blesses my boss. Israel was a blessing to the people that they were held in captivity of. The Hebrew children and Daniel were a blessing to those people that they were in the captivity of. They were there against their will, out of their control, but they were a blessing. And one of the reasons why is because Daniel purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's meat, with the world, with that influence, with the adoption. And one of the things that really kind of caught me, and I've been chewing on it for a while, they changed their names. They changed their names. And I have a name that I'm very proud of, a name that I've resented at times in my life. Having my name different times in my life has been a lot of pressure and a high watermark to try to live up to, until I quit trying to do that. Just, I'm me. I had a snap at somebody one time. I won't say their name because you all know them. They go, "There's only one Rick Harless." There's only one Richard Harless. I go, "There's four." All right? Just so you know. There's not one. There's a bunch of us out there. My mom's brother's name, Rick. Some other Richards sprinkled around. There's a lot of us. But they changed their name, and why did they do that? To get them to assimilate, to get them to adopt the change, to get them to forsake their beliefs as Hebrews and erase their identity. And we have that word identity thrown around a lot. Everything's identity this and identity that, and most of it's associated with some of the silliest stuff I've ever heard in my life. It's just ridiculous, the identity thing. But we do have an identity. And we do have a name as the Lord's people. And Uncle Rick brought it out in the beginning of the meeting, the different names that the Lord's people have gone by. And I actually am quite fond of the peculiar people, just because of how we use peculiar in the English language. But they're a special, separate people, a called out people, a cared for and protected with a hedge of God's protection people, and a people that will continue to be blessed and will continue to be preserved until the Lord's return. And to kind of start to bring things to a close a little bit, they could change their name, but it didn't change who they were. And my dad used to like to tell a story that my brother Ryan didn't like his name. Because I thought my name was Son until I was like 6 years old, you know. And my boys know that. If I am in the house and I go, "Hey, Son," I got like at least 3 people going, "What?" My dad goes, "Ryan, well, what name do you want to be? What do you want to be your name then?" He goes, "Vicky." I don't know. I think it was because it was close to Ricky. I don't know. And there's some people, you know, because I talk to people all day long, and I meet new people all the time, and I always ask them their name. I always ask them the origin of their name. It's very interesting to me. It's like, where did that name come from? And they tell me. I've met people that were descendants of Sitting Bull. I've met people that were descendants of Davy Crockett, just because I asked them about their name. And name's important. A name is something that kind of identifies us. And with the Hebrew children, they were trying to get them to identify with the king. They were trying to get them to identify with their ways, their beliefs, their processes. And we live in a world that, you know, it likes to give people names, but really the intent isn't naming people. I mean, now because of how I voted, I'm a Nazi, a bigot, a chauvinist, some other things. And quite frankly, I don't care. I've been called lots of names. I got in a fight with the boss one time that he liked to assign people their character. It's really kind of, and I can't get into too deep into his whole process. And then he would treat you as he has assigned you the character. We got in a big fight. I said, "No, you're not going to treat me like that. You're not going to say things that make others and try to make me believe things are certain ways. Knock it off." I had to tell him, "I'm not chained to this floor. I'll just leave, man, and you can find somebody else to do this." But we live in a world that is trying to dictate to us our character, our identity, and it's also that they can get us to assimilate and not be a peculiar people, and not be a special people, and not people that will stand up and say, I'm not going to defile myself with this world's meat. I'm not going to assume your guys' roles and processes and bring them into my own, because I know what works, and that what works is the Lord and following him, and not this world. This world is soup du jour. I mean, last week it was Biden, this week it's Trump, next week it's going to be something else. There's always a crisis. Again, I watch too much of the news. Now they're finding, germs and amoebas under the polar ice caps that could wipe out society. And every time somebody's in trouble in politics, we start hearing about UFOs flying around. It's like, I don't. Just Lord, find me faithful in all these things that are going on. Help me keep focused on you. Help me to not defile myself with these distractions. Like I said, they were under the control of others to force them into their ways. And I wanted to just kind of bring up a question. How do you think they identified themselves? They identified themselves as Hebrews, not as Nebuchadnezzar's servants, even though they were still working in their lives. But sometimes I think, and I've done this before, where I've started to identify myself with some of the hardships that I've gone through. Those are just some of the things I've experienced. That's not my identity. Some people, at least now politically, they like to identify themselves as victims. I just want to tell them, hey, knock it off, man. Nobody cares. No one's going to come and save you. Get up and go to work, right? Get on it. Holdouts, progressives, whatever it is, we can't identify with the world. My whole life I thought I was German because of my name. Harless came 1738 from Germany. I'm German. I took a DNA test. I'm like less than 1% German. Mostly Irish and Scottish. I think that's from Grandma Darlene's side. Do we identify with the world? Does wickedness and worldly influence sometimes hold us captive and put us in positions where we feel like we're not in control? We need to remember that sin and wickedness and all of its splendor is subtle. I mean, the really obvious things we can see coming down the pike, we can brace ourselves for and defend ourselves against. My biggest fear in my life are those things that are so subtle, I don't see them coming. I don't see that they get me to compromise how I feel about things and how I think about things, because it creeps. And it's happening. It's happening even among the Lord's people now. Everything is social media. Every time somebody has a thought, they write it down for the whole world to see. And I try not to have my thoughts be known, and I fail at it miserably because it just comes out of my mouth. But I get to see what's other people's minds, and I think to myself, the world has won you. The world has got you sucked in, even amongst God's people. I don't judge them for that, and I don't really criticize them for that, because I guess it's always been that way, and it has. But I try to stop and examine myself to see where it's done that to me, to see where it's crept in its subtlety and put its hooks in me. Sometimes we see God's people speaking what the world is spitting out, and it is alarming. But I have to remind myself that it's the Lord that keeps us and holds us. I have lots of memories of this place and the people and Uncle Randy's house and Auntie and the May meeting and the associations. And I was telling somebody the other day how Grandpa Richard whipped me with his belt right here in the front yard, and because I wouldn't be still. And now I see kids running up and down, and it just makes me happy. Like, there's kids here. There's little ones here. But one of the verses that I go to often, it mean a lot to me, is in Deuteronomy 4. And it says, only take heed to thyself. I've probably read this for you guys before. Take heed to thyself, and keep thy soul diligently. It's an instruction. It's a commandment. It's something that we are told to do. It's not a suggestion. It's saying, take heed to yourself. Rick, I need to take heed to myself. And if I see somebody talking about some of this world stuff and they seemingly have adopted, it will alarm me, it'll tick me off, and it'll disappoint me. But I have to remember, I need to take heed to myself because, like I said, I need to be aware of where those things have crept into my own life. And I need to keep my soul diligently. Because if I don't, there's a consequence to that. In verse 9, it says, lest you forget the things thine eyes have seen. My eyes have seen some things. They're part of my story. They're part of what I've gone through in the process. There's the things that have kept me faithful and dependent on the Lord. My eyes have seen them, and I don't want to forget them. And they depart from your heart all the days of thy life. Gone. I was telling, I think, my cousin Tara, I was telling somebody, I'm starting to forget things. That's not the worst part. I'm forgetting things that I can't remember. And that's a lot. I'm like, what? I used to be able to remember everybody's name, everybody's events and times and places. I used to be the guy that people would ask, hey, what happened in 1982? That happened. That's right. That was Carl. No, it was Kevin. Oh, it was Kevin. That's right. I remembered all those things. And that's going to be part of my process as the Lord continues to let me live. I can't afford to forget what the Lord has done for me. And I will be one that forgets what the Lord has done for me if I don't take heed to myself and keep my soul close to the Lord and make that part of my process. I will forget what he's done, and they'll be removed from my heart like they weren't there. I have a burden for my older sons. Pray for them, if you would, please, Ricky and Andy. They don't serve. Ricky's been to the ABA church in Spokane once or twice. He's been to Brother Foster's church a couple times, which is just 10 minutes from his house. And he knows I know it's in him. And he'll tell me, I need to get these kids in church. And I'm like, you need to get you in church. But yes, those kids too. And he'll go, and he's hot for it, and then he's not for it. I go, just go and sing the songs. It's funny, last time I talked to him. Yeah, the song leader picked songs even their own church didn't know. He was ticked off that their song service stunk. I'll go there and sing louder than anybody, As you guys know, Brother Dan Mader and his wife and his son, his daughter-in-law, they came back. It was so inspiring, so refreshing. Brother Dan's standing in the pulpit today in San Fernando. And it reminded me, we can't ever quit praying for people that their identity is in the Lord, even if they have forsaken it. It's still there. Pray for them. Pray for my sons, if you would. I'll pray for you. You pray for me. And this is what it says. Only take heed to thyself. Keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, unless they depart from your heart all the days of your life. But teach them to thy sons and thy sons' sons. And just a little chunk of the next verse, especially the day thou stood before the Lord. Just a little piece of that verse. What the Lord's done for us, what he's done for me, what he's done for you. That's more important to keep diligently than what the world's spouting out, what they're trying to get us to eat, what they're trying to get us to ingest, what they're trying to do to get us to assimilate to their ideas. And by the way, I never thought that saying simple things like boys are boys, I would have to say under my breath, boys are boys. That's the world that we live in. And if you say obvious truths, even about nature, sometimes you get looks like, can't possibly think that way. What do you mean I can't possibly think that way? It's true. It's the truth. And I just wanted to point something else out too, and it's not 100%, but it's just one of my own observations. And I'm so thankful for John, Tara, Taylor. So thankful for Danae. A lot of my generation, most of them are gone, but not all of them. I'm so thankful you're here. I'm so thankful you have the same memories I do in the same places. You know, we were at Danae's beautiful home yesterday, and I looked next door, Uncle Don's house, and I thought, wow, so many memories there. Wonderful times. My emotional dad, I remember one time we were leaving, and everybody stood out in the front yard and sang to his grouchy self, "Until we meet again," as a joke, and he just stood there and cried. I thought, wow. But it's not funny at all, but it seems like people that leave, they get disenfranchised with the Lord's people before they go and start to think less of the Lord's people. And it's something my Uncle Steve said a couple years ago from this pulpit. It will stick with me forever, hopefully. He said, love what the Lord loves and love how the Lord loves. The Lord loves his people. And a warning to me is if I stop loving the Lord's people, if I start to feel disenfranchised or look down on them, and I'm not saying I'm guiltless of those things because everybody likes to talk some trash from time to time. But if I really start feeling that way, I need to stop. And I need to draw closer to the Lord and keep my soul diligently. I don't want to feel badly about the Lord's people. I want to love every one of them, even the ones I don't like. Somebody asked me one time, I heard you don't like that guy. I go, no, not at all. And they go, I didn't know that. I go, I know. I didn't want you to know that. But since you're asking me, no, I don't. I saw you sitting with him at dinner for 2 hours. Yes, you did. High-fiving, eating, and talking. Yes, you did. That's what I want you to see. So I did on purpose. But going back to the story, like I said, it was brought to a close. Daniel made a decision not to defile himself with the king's meat. And in doing so, as I read that verse, the stand that Daniel made, I thought, how many times have I made a decision? How many times have I made a stand? Thus saith Rick, this shall be. And 20 minutes later, it wasn't that way anymore. I want to say that the Lord will find me faithful, but I need him for that. Is another thing I need him for. If I want to be found faithful, I have to cleave to him. I have to cling to him. I have to depend on him. I've got to talk to him. And, you know, I like the phrase, well, the Lord's with me, blah, 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 whatever the rest of the sentence is. But in reality, what I need to remember is I need to be where the Lord's at, because the Lord's not always going to be with me if I'm just wandering around aimlessly. I can separate myself from him. What shall separate me from the love of Christ? Well, there's only really one thing in this world that can, and that's me. And that space between my ears and my thoughts and my feelings and becoming disenfranchised with the Lord's people, or what I think is probably the scariest temptation, is if I discount my faithfulness and how important it is, not to the world, which we had a great meeting. We see people that have had these wonderful influences on me. And I was standing in the foyer yesterday, and Uncle Randy's back there at the same time. My Uncle Don was back there. Uncle Steve was back there. Uncle Rick was back there. Richie was back there. And Blaine was back there. And I was standing there in the middle of these men that have had a wonderful influence on my life. And it was just for a brief moment that all these men intersected at once, and as they were going different directions. But before I knew it was just Richie and Blaine and I standing there. And I said, since you're here, thank you so much for your influence. Because when I was a kid, I was watching you, and you didn't know. You know, Truman came up to me and said, I was watching you. And I appreciated it from the very start because I'm a watcher. I watch people. And I did when I was a kid. And I watched Richie and Leslie wrestle with their 2 little kids when they were a young family. And I even adopted some of Blaine's mannerisms. If you ever see me hear something, and I go, yep, I stole that from Blaine because it says it all. It's usually when Sister Karen's talking. She'll say something and Blaine goes, yep. The Lord's able to keep what we've committed to him, even if we're not, especially because we're not. I've quit smoking 384 times last month, right? Those things that I would do, I don't. Those things that I wouldn't do, I do. And it makes me think to myself, oh, wretched man that I am. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. One of my favorite songs, I need thee. I sing this to Jen sometimes, it irritates her. I need thee, every hour I need thee. And I sing it to her, but you know, that feeling is toward the Lord. Lord, I need you every hour. I need you all the time. Daniel made a stand. He made a decision. He depended on the Lord for it. Was it an impossible task? And sometimes we have to go through those feelings in our process. Is it impossible? No. For Daniel, was it dangerous? Yes. It was very dangerous. But impossible? No. They trusted the Lord. They were active in their faith. They were active in their life. I once had a really good friend that used to talk all the time about, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. And I had to tell him, yeah, but you got to go to work, right? We can't lay on the ground with our mouth open like baby birds and the Lord put stuff in it. We got to get up and go. Those things that you have both seen and heard in me, do. The verse that I want to leave us with is just half of the last verse that we read in Daniel. Just the first half of that. Remembering that. And I didn't read the verses in 2 Timothy this morning, but he saved us. He called us. And he called us to his purpose. And like I said, I have my processes. I have my own purpose. What is that? Well, it's the same purpose as everybody. To get to a place in my life where it's a worry-free life. My kids all saved and baptized and serving. That's a goal of mine. That's a goal of mine for other people's lives. Right? That's what my goal is. That's what I want. For the Lord to find me serving, to have plenty of money in the bank, dogs house trained, barns full, so that I can take my ease. But I have to be reminded sometimes that I'm called to his purpose. And I need to be useful to him. I need to submit myself to him daily. They trusted the Lord with their action. They trusted the Lord with their lives. And the last verse in Daniel, chapter 1, the first half of it, I don't even need to turn there. You don't either. It says, and Daniel continued. He continued. He went. He didn't get off the bus. He didn't get off the train. He continued. He continued to pursue. And there's so many verses that I could romanticize with that. Faint yet pursuing. And I've gone way too long. I know you guys are tired. Thank you for allowing me to preach this morning. I'm sure you'd all love to get home, put your fat girl pants on, and take your ease, right? Have a relaxing day. Sometimes I get to this point on occasions and events like this, and I know I know it's going to be over. I don't want it to be over. The great thing is it doesn't have to be over for any of us. We can continue in a state of revival as we continue, as we pursue, as we follow the Lord, as we seek him out. And remember that, yes, the Lord's with us, but we need to be where he is. We need to be where he is. And we need to submit ourselves to him. He's not called to our purpose. We're called to his purpose. Is that purpose always going to be a worry-free life? Well, not if you read the scriptures, mostly not. And I even heard Sister Joni say this a couple years ago. If life is easy, probably doing something wrong. And I thought, well, I don't think I like that. I don't think I agree with that. I know what you're saying, and you're probably right, but the Lord's purpose. Thank you for your attention this morning. Thank you for allowing me to preach yet once again. I told Uncle Rick, I said, I was telling Jen, does Uncle Rick think if he doesn't ask me to preach, he's going to hurt my feelings because he always asks me to preach? And then I thought, and I told Uncle Rick this, I go, well, if he didn't ask me to preach, it might hurt my feelings. I don't know. I'm humbled. I'm thankful for the opportunity. Uncle Rick, I'll turn it over to you.